Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My name is Lambert Mbom. I am a freelance journalist based in Washington, D.C. Today is November 24th, 2020. It's 7:15 p.m. Washington, D.C. time. It is a pleasure for me to do this show today. And by some accident, this show is taking place on Tuesday night. It was originally scheduled for yesterday, and due to some technical issues, I was not able to broadcast. But I'm sure it was my late father's spirit that was pulling me on to today, because I know I did a show about 3 weeks ago on the day he died, and coincidentally, my father was buried on the 24th of November 2018. So it's exactly 2 years today since my dad passed. And on this occasion, want to continue to pray for him, to thank God for having given me the best dad I could ever ask for, and to continue to say, may he continue to rest in peace. And the topic for tonight is a strange one. I am going to be talking about death in a different context. I just talked about my dad who passed, but tonight I'm going to be talking about somebody who had to bury his son. Somebody whose son, the one that he anticipated was going to carry his legacy through, the one he had heaped his hope on, the one he knew he had nourished, was going to be the one to bury him. And unfortunately, Emmanuel Kafain Jr., Emmanuel Mbeng Kafain Jr. passed on in June 2018. And, when a young man dies, there are too many questions. Everybody is asking, what happened? Why did this have to happen? And so many questions. But what struck me is, generally, writing a book is a strange experience. It's a challenging experience. But writing about tragedy could even be more terrifying. 2 years ago, a dad was home with his sons, and all of a sudden, the calmness of the home was destabilized because he went on to check for his son and discovered that his child was not responsive. And lo and behold, when the ambulance picked his son up and they went to the hospital, he was pronounced dead. I don't want to tell the story. I want the author. What we are here to discuss this evening is about a book. A man who decided that he was not going to sit and wallow in tears. He was not going to sit, and just seek professional counseling such as we have in the United States and in Europe. He was not just going to sit and do nothing. He decided to drown his tears and his fears by putting pen to paper. He decided to take on that challenge of writing about his experience, this terrifying experience, this tragedy that has befallen him. He decides to turn that into an experience for others to enter his shoes, enter his world, feel his pain. Not everybody does that. He has written a memoir, 140 pages long or more. Ladies and gentlemen, this painful death, that is the title of the book. The loss of a child is a parent's worst nightmare. Don't let this happen to you. This book, this copy came to me on Friday. And I sat down to read this book and I could not put it down until Monday morning. And in between that, I did many other things. But that's just to tell you that once you pick it up, you will not like to put it down. And that is why it makes for such interesting reading, even though it's about the painful death of a son. If you are a friend, a relation, anybody who has ever known Prince Kafain Emmanuel, but and your name is not in this book, then you should call him up and find out why he did not mention your name. Because I lost count of the number of people that were mentioned in here. It is a well-written piece. It is a letter that a father sat down to write to his son, but ended up writing a book, one of whose chapters is the letter. And I don't want to give up much. I want to say thank you, Prince Kafain. Thank you for taking the time, the energy, not just to put this, but also to come on to share your experience about what it took to write this book. I know that you and I have had a series of questions or a series of discussions at the back, but I'm going to let this flow. And given that you are a man of God and ordained deacon, something I just found out this evening, I'm going to let you, from the abundance of your heart, speak to this. And I'm going to say this. I am a parent. I have 3 kids. My eldest child is 10, and I have a set of twins. One of them a boy that just turned 8. I told Prince Kafain that immediately I finished reading this book, I had to go hug my son, because this is about a father and a son. He lost his son and too many questions. And for me, like I'm going to be saying throughout the show, there are 4 subplots in the main plot, which is a story of a father losing a son. Without much ado, Prince Kafain, welcome.
Thank you very much, Lambert. Before I say anything, I like to say I'm very sorry for your loss. I knew your father personally. He was a gentleman, and he was a friend to my dad too, and they were all old-time teachers. So I knew him very well. I even knew your father before knowing you, because you probably were very young. So thanks again for having me in your broadcast. Yes, like Mr. Lambert Baum has already said in the intro, something happened to me on June 29, 2018. 2018. And it's something that I didn't cherish, something I still don't cherish. It's something that I don't wish should happen to anybody else. That's why some of my clients told me, you are very good at expressing yourself in writing. So are you going to do a book on this one? I said, yes, I owe this to the community in which I grew up, because there are lots of things that we in our community, especially the African community, we take for granted. We have relationships with our children. We have very good relationships at home. But there are things that we don't see, because we take them for granted. We presume everything. And so there was no problem on that particular day. I was home with my 2 boys. We were home that Friday all day, nothing happening. I didn't feel like going somewhere. My cousin, Victor Fonchas, actually asked me to come over. I was going to go down there in the evening, and I told him, no, I just don't feel like leaving the house. And so my boys had lunch and went back to their rooms. I was in my own room. When my wife came home in the evening, she made supper. So I called my younger son, who was around in the living room, and told him, go get your brother so he can come down for dinner. He went up to his room, came back, and told me he is sleeping. And so the junior one and I sat down and ate, and he went back to his room. I sat by myself in the living room, and was just kind of bored, and decided to go upstairs. So I just walked up to my son Junior's room and found him there laying flat. So I touched him, and he was cold. I screamed. My younger son came, rushed in. My wife rushed up. Uh, we called the ambulance, and I immediately started CPR. And in less than 5 minutes, the emergency team came in, took him. My son and I drove behind the ambulance to the Mount Vernon Hospital, where he was pronounced dead. So without going too far into what happened, because I don't think we have enough time, that's what happened. And I decided to narrate the story or tell the story so that people can understand from my experience the little issues that they can be dealing with when they have children. So as we go on, I can't say more than I'm saying right now, but I will answer questions as Lambert asked me, and you may know it a little bit, and then you may be encouraged to get the book and read it, because it's very helpful. It's very, very helpful to everyone.
So thank you, Prince Kafain, and I really want to say that there are 3 reasons why I'm doing this show tonight. The same reasons why you decided to write a book was in order to deal with the pain, but not just for yourself. It was also to share with the community so that from your experience, others can learn. We know that within our community, there is a problem with reading. But I'm telling you, if you are a parent, you have a boy, you have a son, if you have a friend,
and even a daughter,
right? Any of them, you want to get a copy of this book. That's one of the reasons why I brought this up today. Please, if for any reason, one thing that you want to take away from this show tonight, get a copy of this book. If for nothing, just to tell Prince Kafain Ashia, I just spoke with him. Maybe that's the last thing that we're going to do tonight. He's going to tell you that this book is not bringing any money to him. Okay, but it's going to help a lot. It is a conversation we need to have within our community. I just said in the beginning, when we have painful experiences within our community, we don't know how to deal with this pain. So we have a lot of people moving around with pain, and they are passing on this pain onto others. But I think what you did, a classical example of how to deal with pain. How? Sit down and write. Write, even if it's just for yourself, is going to be some soothing, some relieving experience. But before I just want to get into the very first thing you wrote in there. And I'm looking at, this is something that Dr. Toyang, who wrote the preface to it, said. Because when I read through, one of the things that struck me was you lost 4 of your sisters before your son. So it seems as if you're already comfortable with death. Death was something that has become normal to you. So what is it about your son? Because I've not read any book that you have written in honor of your sisters. And by the way, Prince Kafain has written, is it 2 other books? One as a cancer survivor, and the third one is eluding me. So this is not his first. So my question is, why did you have to write this particular one? And you already had the experience of your sisters. So what about you? What is it about your son that made you say, hey, let me go write?
Thanks for that question. It doesn't mean I love my sisters any less. In the space of 10 years, from 1992 to 2000, I lost 4 of my sisters, the 4 sisters that come after me. And I used the departures of my sisters to make a point to my son, the one who is alive today, and tell him, you see, you're not the only one who lost a sibling. I lost 4 before you. Losing a child is not the same as losing a sister or a brother, because you feel directly responsible to your children. You brought them to this world, and you feel it's your obligation to take care of them. And so when they go away, the pain is just different, which is why I decided to put the story of my son in writing. I have mentioned my sisters in my last book, the one about cancer, and I've mentioned them in this book too. But this book was dedicated to my son. I wrote about him because he was my son, and he was my direct responsibility, which is why I carried on the job. I don't know if I'm doing a good job, telling you why, but that's why I wrote the book.
No, I mean, again, you cannot dispute that the fact that you have a sister and you have a son, even if you had to make a choice, isn't it? This is call it, this is your own blood. I mean, I don't want to be facetious about it, but I think it's a good thing. But again, there's something about the entire narrative. The way I look at the narrative, reading through, I was left with the impression that you had more questions than answers. You set out to find out, why did he have to be my son? Why my son? What really happened? And I don't know whether at the end of it you found an answer, because myself, I did not. Just reading through. So why did you have to go in search of an answer? And unlike, I don't want to say that is something that is we are used to in Africa. You would have had to go to some traditional person to find out, is this something that somebody did or so. So that question, why my son, did you have an answer? And even why did you even have to ask the question? Because he's dead and gone.
Exactly. When it happened, I immediately thought, this should not have happened. And so a lot of things run into your mind, and you immediately start blaming yourself first before blaming all the people around you. And a child comes from a father and a mother. So you either blame yourself first or you blame the mother first. And so being the leader of my family, I thought blaming myself or blaming my son's mother for the passing wasn't going to do me any good. I thought everybody needed closure. I looked at my junior son, and I felt if we were playing the blame game, it was going to hurt him even more, and you would never get answers. So I gathered the family immediately into my house, and I told them nobody should blame anybody. It's the will of God. I'm a God-fearing person, and this has happened to me because I can handle it. So what I expect everybody to do is to pray and wait for the day I announce his funeral. We will come, we will bury him, and we will accept what God has done. And so, in the process of writing, sometimes I'll try to, play around so that I don't hurt anybody's feeling, because I'm telling a story. And I know that, coming from where we come from, people always know exactly what story you are trying to tell. And there are a lot of people who know me, and there are a lot of people who knew how I was living my life, and there are a lot of people who heard, because there's always a gossip around. And so there are a lot of people who were aware of the gossip. There are a lot of people who understood why this happened. There are a lot of people who knew what my son could have been doing. Because let me be upfront with you, Mr. Mbeng. It was only after my son died that I heard the word fentanyl. His mother used to call and tell me he had bad friends. He's moving around with people she doesn't like, and I just thought maybe he smokes or he's doing what we all do. And of course, all children, including even you and myself, uh, grew up in some recalcitrant atmosphere. Children are always recalcitrant in one way or the other, sometimes good or bad, and this sometimes leads us into leads them into some adolescent cantankerousness, if I must say. So he had all these qualities. He was recalcitrant, just like many of his friends, and but I didn't read into all of this until it happened. So when it happened, That's when I heard that he had gotten himself with some bad friends, and probably they gave him one of those things which he couldn't handle. And so that's how you say OD came about. So it must be it was OD when I finally had the results from the tox report. So I've spoken so much, and I'm
So,
even
so yes, I really, again, I said there are like four subplots in it, and I really want to welcome Brother Divine Chamukong. I'm sure he's also watching. Welcome to the house, and I appreciate your presence. But you just touched on one of those things. The subplot that I find in here. I don't think personally to you the reason why your son died is important because you are dealing with the fact that the son has died. But for the rest of us, isn't it? It is important to note that there is something that we are missing. There is something that we are not catching on. And because we are living in this community here in the United States, there is a big problem that we who have families might not be paying attention to. And it is the thing of drug overdose. Our children, our young people, the young ones that we live with at home, have issues, and they are now taking these issues and maybe dealing with them. So peer pressure in a certain sense, isn't it? And
exactly.
so we find that you and I might have had our own peer pressure, but the way we grew up, that peer pressure was a pressure that would have been easily, you
It's
could call my
manageable.
father to say, hey, your son is doing something with my son here. How are we handling it? But this is something you're completely oblivious of. You don't even know who your son's friends are and all that. And so
Exactly.
again,
And
I
the law
think
and the laws here protect because uh, for instance, he had a driving infraction somewhere, and I called, and they asked me if I was his lawyer, and I said no, I'm his dad, and they said, well, you don't have authorization to talk to get the information. And so this thing in this society where we live right now, where you need authorization, like if the kids are in school, you can't go and get a kid's report card. You can't just drop in there and say, well, this is my kid. I need to know how he's doing in school. They will ask you him to authorize you to be able to get his report. So those are kind of the things in this community, in this society, that we are not very used to. And sometimes, we live different life at home, but we're living in a society that has different laws, and it's difficult for us because of our hardships, because we are all struggling here, and we don't have the means to sit down like we would do back in the place where we came from. And so, not to belabor the point, those are some of the difficulties that we from the African community are facing.
I realized one of the things you really struggled with throughout the book was to find out whether you think you were a good father to your son, isn't it? Because you really tried to say you did all that you could, and you realized that there were certain habits that your son had that you just could not give in. You were a strict disciplinarian. It was either going to be your way or he's not going to have
Exactly.
that. And so
Exactly.
I mean, can you speak to the fact of parenting? What parenting style? Because your book lays out that there are, I think, four parenting styles, and the one that you are recommending. Can you speak to that?
Exactly. I kept thinking that, I could make choices for my son. I will tell him, this is what I want you to do. This is when I want you to do a particular thing. This is how I want you to go. And for example, when he left high school, I wanted him to go to a school away from me in south of Virginia. But that's not what he wanted. And so he and I literally had fights and physical fights because I would try to bundle him into the car to drive him to a school down in Richmond. And so I was trying to see his development from my own perception. He had his own. and he says, why don't you listen to me? This is what I want to do. You are making me do what you want to do. And I kept thinking that I could change him because I thought I knew exactly what I wanted him to be. And until he died, that was when I realized I should have been listening to him, because maybe what he was saying he wanted to do was just what God had destined for him. I reflected back to myself. When I left high school, I went to Nigeria. My dad didn't know that I went to Nigeria. He only heard that I'd gone to Nigeria. And when I was coming to the US, I was working in Douala. My dad heard from my sister that I was flying to the US in the night. That was in 1983. And he drove down from Bamenda to the airport and met me and asked me in com, when I said, look, in com means you were just taking off. Have you told me? And I said, well, I was going to write to you when I get there. And he just shook his head. So those are some of the things that we go through here. Not only me, we have these children and we don't give them freedom of choice to do what they want to do because we think we can guide them. And this stems from our culture. But sometimes we just need to listen to them, advise them, and listen to them. And then stay away. Let them try and fail. They'll come to you when they fail. I'm saying this to you now. I can't say it to myself because if I had listened to Junior, I probably would still have him. But I was pushing him. So he started avoiding telling me what he wanted to do. And it's a little bit too late for me now, but it shouldn't be late for the rest of the people.
So you're welcome. If you're just joining the show, you're listening to the Lambom Show, and we are discussing painful death, the loss of a child. It's a parent's worst nightmare with Prince Kafain, Emmanuel, Mbeng. And it's kind of hard for me to swallow that, isn't it? Because, again, as a parent, you're supposed to be the one directing the child. You're supposed the child would not just want to make choices and you want to go along because the child is making those choices for you or is making those choices for themselves, because I realized that you have a big network in the United States. And by the way, it's important to know that Prince Kafain came to the United States in 1983. Okay, so that's a long time. And so he has a large network, not just of family members, but friends. Because I know one of his uncles, Gilbert, also used to talk to him. And I'm sure Dr. Toyang too used to talk to him. And I'm sure aunts. So he had many of these, people around him who could figure out what is it he really wants, and then we'll be able to bring that to you. So I'm saying there's a balancing act in terms of the fact that, yes, as a parent, you needed something. There's something you wanted for your son, but maybe that was not what your son wanted. You needed to have a middle ground of that. I don't know whether the uncles, aunties ever sat down with you to say, hey, go slow on this young man.
Well, sometimes people know things about your child, and they don't want to tell you because they don't want to come out as if they are telling you what to do. And everybody has their own problems. So they didn't see ahead. Most of the people you are calling, they didn't see ahead. They didn't think that this would happen. And so it fell upon them just the way it fell upon me. And it took them by surprise that it happened. And everybody now would reveal what they knew after the fact. He didn't have that kind of relationship with his uncle Gilbert. He had a relationship with his uncle Fonchas because of Fonchas's children, Lambert Fonchas and Becky. They are the children that were here. But
Without interrupting you, every time I read Lambert, I thought that it was referring to me, and I was very proud until you have just revealed that it was Lambert Funchas. But go ahead.
you're a little bit too old to
Too
be
old.
Lambert Funchas.
Right.
So there were a lot of people he reached out to, and there are a lot of people that probably knew certain things that I didn't know. But because they thought these things were just going to go away, nobody took it upon themselves to reach out to me and say, well, this is what we should do. Because, the way I live my life, I don't live my life by, depending on people or asking people. I usually try to be a little discreet and private. And so I don't know if that was a good characteristic of me or not. But a lot of people knew just, and we all thought it was just adolescence. It was just the behavior of children around. And so when it now happened, it was a wake-up call to everybody to now realize that, oh, if this can happen to Prince, it can happen to me. So I would not answer that by, laying blame on any of his uncles and saying that they knew, because nobody actually knew this could happen. In fact, when it happened, I called my cousin Victor Funchas and told him I didn't know he was going to die, because he and I usually we go very intimate on discussions about children, and I said, this child is running around like this. One of these days the engine will knock. On that very day, I told him I wasn't coming down to Dumfries because the car engine has knocked, and they have brought the car. I was making a joke, and I said the engine has knocked, and now I am here to fix the car, meaning I was here to monitor my son. At the time I was saying that, he probably was dead in his room. Wow. Because I don't know when he passed out. I don't know if he died on the way to the hospital. I don't know if he died in the house. But I know that he lost consciousness here at home because I didn't talk to him again. I didn't revive him. And that was the end of the story. So everybody who was in his life realized on that day that they should have done more, but it was too late.
Julius Ngole says, sir, thanks for that parenting advice. Alice Gambu, it's really hard, and I pray that God Almighty will heal you from every pain. May his soul continue to rest in peace. Now, one of the other subplots we have in this story is because he had a junior brother,
Exactly.
Taku.
Yes.
And it seems as if they were bonding so much that this became a really, call it a blow, because one of the things you said in your book was he had helped Taku to get a job.
Exactly.
And Taku ended up not going to work at that location because he had to take care of this
he got Taku a job. The Valentine Day of that year, 2018. They had taken me to one cozy restaurant in Fairfax, in Tyson's Corner, and he told me he was going to get Taku a job where he was working, and he got him the job. And Taku was going to start working on Monday of the Friday that he died. So when and to your point, he and Taku were very close. They were best friends. That was the only person who could reach him. And so if I really wanted to tell him to do something, I would tell Taku, and vice versa. So when Taku and I drove to the hospital, and they told me the doctor was going to come and talk to me, and when the doctor came and pronounced him dead, it blew Taku off completely. And that's when I decided I needed my composure, because he was blown off completely. He forgot that I was his dad, and he forgot that Junior was my son. I had to hold him and remind him that Junior is my son because he was pushing me away and was in, as if he literally, if you look at the two of us, it was as if you have killed my brother, something like that. Where is my brother? Why are you holding me? They're telling me Junior is dead and you are holding me. You're trying to talk to me. And I held him tight and I spoke to God. I said, Lord, have mercy on us. And I told him, your brother was my son. And I could feel his heart calm down. And he held me and embraced me and held me tight. And later on, he told me he had forgotten that that I had a relationship with my son. That he just couldn't believe that happened. So it, a lot of people, it blew them away. And when you read the book, you will find out reactions from family members who came in different shapes and forms.
So I don't know whether you have the courage yet, but let me do the first reading for you before you get to the next, because we are talking about raising kids, and on page 19 we talked about the theory of raising children. You said expression of emotional setbacks. Let me get. Even when parents disagree on systemic issues, their children need to take a back seat and be left out of the discussion. Expression of emotional setbacks can lead adolescent kids into behavioral issues. And on basis of speculation, and without any evidence to propound any theory here, my conviction is simply that my boy could have been fighting very hard to subdue feelings of depression that could have stemmed from our domestic readjustments. And all the concerned individuals around him would have failed to isolate him from realisms of such discrepancy. What are you referring to there?
Here, I'm referring to the fact, it's obvious, it's not a new thing to know that because of some problems, our family was not together when he died. When I say our family, I mean his mother, myself, and my two boys. We were not the family that he was accustomed to. And so that usually tears families apart because he took responsibility as the elder son and thought, since there was no discussion, I would not discuss the problems the mother and I had with the boys. And so there was a lot of speculation on his part. And in order to punish me, because we children, and I call even myself children, we children have a softer spot for our mothers than our fathers. So every time there is that kind of separation, the children sympathize with the mother and think that she cannot fend for herself. And so that's what I'm referring to here.
So again, I think again, you and I had this conversation apart, and I don't think that is something that we need to belabor, but it's an important point that generally boys have a soft spot for their mothers. Okay, that's something that we all have noted. But I think that I found it very, very interesting that you needed to pay attention to what was happening to realize that there was a divorce involved. You never mentioned it. There's not a single time you mentioned the word divorce in your story. There's never a single time, and I like what you said, no blame game. There's even a chapter where you celebrate the women in your son's life and you are celebrating their mother.
His mother, yeah.
It is. I mean, very often divorce is a painful process. It's painful. There are many things. I mean, you can unpack all that. But again, I find it curious that Your son is above, I mean, he's 21, I mean, 25 by the time he's dying. He's an adult. And one would have expected that you would have sat him down or sat them down to say, hey, without getting into the blame game, this is life and we all have to manage with it and move on. I don't know what at any point in this whole scenario, I mean, and this is not to find out whether he had an impact. This is just to discuss from the societal point of view of going through a divorce and having kids and how to deal with that through that whole process. What part will the kids play? And do you have to really sit down to talk to them?
Exactly. You sit down and talk to them. You just watch your words. You talk to them without acting as if you were right or their mother was wrong. You just try to talk to them, make them understand that, well, sometimes we are better off uh, separated than staying together and having these problems. And as a matter of fact, they understood because uh, when we separated, we became more uh, a compatible family than when we were together. I don't know if you understand what I mean.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
so sometimes uh, when you have space, when you have the kind of space at home, uh, it fosters a relationship, and so our relationship improved with the children and the parents when we were no longer together because we could now discuss, even with the mother. Like I say, we didn't see this coming because the mother and I were on top of his case until he died. It was I was in New York the first time she called me. I was at the convention in New York, when she called me, and the following morning I took off and came, and she and I went down to the hospital, and that's when she tried to talk to me about what was happening. And so we started discussing and trying to see how we could manage the problem. Unfortunately, uh, she died. He died less than a week after. So the relationship, they understood. They were the big. He, in particular, was a big boy, and he knew. We had discussed. He knew exactly what was happening, and he knew our concerns, and he was just trying to do his thing. Unfortunately, he himself was cut short.
So I like to get over to the other thing that we talked about, and let's I'll end on that. So this again is, I'm reading from page 24, where you are looking at the possible theories about what had happened to your son, and you are talking about listening to WTAP, one of these radio stations here, and they talked about the National Suicide Prevention Center, where they stated that 67% of students commit suicide from depression, domestic and social problems, and educational difficulties, to mention only a few. There was a report on ABC News that funeral home directors say that a small amount of fentanyl can be very deadly, and such reports now raise my eyebrows. Even a caller said on the Howard Stern show that he had lost his 29-year-old son to opioids, making me question myself even more. There is no doubt that these statistics got me wondering whether any of these issues had anything to do with my dear son, mindful of all the plethora of events that were beginning to feature in his daily life. Now, that is deep, because I think that one of the issues in our community too is just that we hear these things and we think that they are meant for maybe the African American kids or the white kids. They are not things
Exactly.
that will affect us. We too, our children are part of these statistics. The 67% includes our
Our
own
children
kids.
actually are African Americans because they are the same in the culture here. And so these statistics include them. And now we're beginning to see that it includes them because it is plaguing our community right now as we speak. I mean, after Junior, I don't like to call names without authorization, but after Junior, we've had so many cases in the same line. And so there are a lot of people who are going through this same pattern. And it's something that we have to do something about.
So, again, just for the sake of the audience, it is important that our young people, who some of them were born here, some we brought up from Africa, they're experiencing something within this culture. And we need to pay attention to that. We really need to pay attention. The opioid crisis is a crisis across the United States that affects not only adults, but our kids. And you want to take a simple example of e-cigarettes. When e-cigarettes was authorized, the first people who were buying these e-cigarettes were high school kids. Okay, our kids, and we don't know. So we need to take care of some of these things. And I don't know. I mean, what advice would you give? Or maybe I should rephrase the question and put it this way. Having known this now, what are you doing? What is it you are doing to take care of tackle to ensure that a similar thing doesn't occur?
You see, it gets really difficult because you become an annoying parent when a thing like this happens to you. You get into the house. If you don't find your son, you're immediately thinking he is doing what the other one did. If he goes in to take a shower and he stays too long, you start worrying. Is he in there longer than he should be because something is happening? If you get into the house and he's sleeping, you rush immediately to his room to find out if he is okay, and so you become like a nag to your child because of an experience that you've had, and so it constantly, disturbs me every day when I walk into the house. If you see an accident, you see a red light, or you see an ambulance going somewhere, or you hear that there's an accident around an area where you think your son is, you're immediately thinking, is he involved? So those are some of the things that happen. But you just have to talk to them and be assured. You be assured because they will tell you. Tapu and I, now we have a relationship. We go to the grave. He knows how I feel. I know how he feels. And I just don't want to, beat him too much on this issue because he understands. And sometimes he tells me, stop worrying. I know exactly what your problems are. I won't do anything. And, again, you can only do what you can do and leave the rest to God.
Absolutely. And Eliska says, I feel like as parents, being friendly to our kids and allowing them to open up can go a long way. Absolutely.
Exactly.
So, yeah. I mean, I've been doing a lot of the questioning. I'd like you to choose what do you think was your favorite passage in this book? Which one?
Let me read a poem, the poem that I used to bury him. Is that okay?
Yes, absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay. And this poem, I call it Painful Love. My eyes were fixed on this legitimate bond, staring at the showers of shame dropped from it. My ears heard a voice that sounded so distant and faint, but was so real and acquainted. My heart knew how so much it owned, but couldn't explain the cruel passion that cracked my neck from side to side. The ignorance was ready for the time, but there was no one else to trust but me. So I secluded myself from all fantasies of glory, driving the bitterness of sudden pain into a lonely heart that burned and hurt and stole away all pride in the ability to love and to cherish that love. The ashes of which are now left behind in undefined but painful memories with wishes of the hope of a fantastic rejuvenation, blemishing from a heart so deeply wounded to blame, but still wanting for it to be the way it was or should have been, fearing only to retire by saying, Fare ye well to the broken pieces left of him. And dreaming that open minds would feel the dream that was forever meant to be. But in a battle of loss without weapon, passion has been taken for granted by a sense of black humor. And by instinct, great pride is lost and will be buried in terrible fascination, bringing out a victory that shall always be wrong.
This is, I mean, writing prose is easy, but it seems as if you have mastered poetry and writing this. So I get confused to see
Yeah,
because
I write poetry. Poetry too.
exactly
If
because
you
when
read the
you're
book, you'll find out a lot of poetry on the southern Cameroon's struggle, which we are fighting now. Because I grew up a southern Cameroonian. I was born in 1956, and I went. Our problem really started to hurt us in 1972 when I was in CPC class 3. So and incidentally, my literature teacher in CPC Bali, Mr. Arendi, is in Atlanta right now. And so I write prose a lot, but I also write poetry.
so again before I even let me read a few comments. Julius Ngole says, I applaud your courage to speak about how you lost your son. As a young parent, I have learned a lot from your story. May God continue to strengthen you and your family. Aliska says, powerful poem. Now let's move to this thing about writing, because it's not just that you are idle, then you are looking for something to fill up your time, and then you sit down to. I mean, how does it work for you? I mean, because you are, first of all, you're in pain, so you still have. Where do you get the courage even to be able to sit down and put something like this? When even those of us who have normal lives, call them normal lives, we don't have. We cannot master that.
Well, with writing it comes. You don't plan to write. You don't say, "Well, I'm going to write tomorrow." You see, sometimes you're sleeping, and some lines come into your head when you're sleeping. So I always have like a blank sheet of paper by my bedside. Sometimes, a phrase comes in, and even with my eyes closed, I will put down some words and then get up in the morning and then build them up. Sometimes you are sitting in a reception. Lambert, you meet Lambert in Bowie somewhere, and he gives you a drink, and then he's going walking out, and you are thinking, okay, how do I thank him? And then you put down a few phrases. So that's the art of writing. Uh, it, some people do it with a little tape recorder, but I usually try to remember everything that happens to me, and then you put these phrases together, put them aside, and then put them together when you sit down. And so I always have blank sheets of paper with me. It's not like I sit down and then I say I'm going to write at this time. Sometimes you are blank. You sit down to write, and there's nothing coming. You just stop until the next time when something is coming. But when you have an experience like this one, there's always a lot of information in your head. So it's just now putting this information appropriately in a way. Whether you want to put it rudely, you want to be crude, you want to be polite, you want to make it amusing, you want to you make it comic, and or you just want to tell a story as is. So those are all the facets, which I go through. So I express myself. It all started when I was little. If something was wrong in our house, I grew up for a long time. I was the only boy in the house, and all my sisters were always together. So if there was something bothering me, I'll go into my room, even if it's about my dad. I will write it down and go and leave it on his bed, and then he will come and read it and say, "Why didn't you just tell me?" I say, I don't know, but I always express myself in writing. And so I grew up, and the first book, Even Love Can Hurt You, was actually a fiction story based on some romantic experiences that I had. The second book that I wrote was on cancer. I was diagnosed with cancer. And after that, one of my clients, who my high profile clients, told me, well, you have to write this story so that people can understand, which is another thing which I'll tell young people here, because cancer diagnosis is not a death sentence. I was diagnosed 17 years ago, or rather, I had my cancer treatment 17 years ago, and I'm still hanging around. So, to answer your question, writing is an art which comes in very, very many different ways.
So again, let me ask. I mean, because for you, writing is, call it something that comes to you as kind of a passion, isn't it? And I'm
Exactly.
wondering, in reading through the book, you find out that for a person like you, you're a community-driven person. Okay, you are a man of the people. So because you're a man of the community, it is kind of easy for you to deal with shocks like this because you have many people who come around you to surround you to provide the necessary solace. But I'm wondering, what is the one thing you thought throughout these 2 years that has really meant a lot to you in terms of dealing with the pain of the loss of your son?
Uh, the one thing, it would be difficult to say just one thing, but just the fact that I knew there were a lot of people who felt saddened by my demise, and just the fact that I was receiving love from lots of people, just the fact that I knew that there were so many people out there that share my plight, feel my pain, gave me the courage to move on. Because at some point I thought, well, it's time for me to leave this country, go back to Bello, sit there, and maybe just wait for the day God calls me. Or maybe it's time for me to just, give up on life. And then I will sit down and I say, well, what is that? What is that going to do me? So the one thing that has kept me going is the love that I'm receiving from people like you, people like everybody who has reached out to me. And then this writing exercise was a very good distraction because for the period that I started writing till when it got published, my focus was on, saying something here and editing here and saying something here. And, so my mind was just set on the book. And every day, every day, the pain doesn't go away. And I must say this to people who are reading. Don't think that when you read the book, the pain goes away. That's everlasting pain. Every day you walk into your house, the pain will be there. You get into the car or you get into somebody's house and see how he's uh, interacting with his children, uh, you will miss your own child. Uh, you see a child's picture, and so the pain will always be there. But the understanding, and at this juncture, I also say the understanding that God has a plan for all of us also helped you, deal with the fact that, okay, well, that was the plan of God.
Yeah, and coincidentally, one of the things in reference to what you just mentioned, you are writing about your son, but you found it necessary to put in the stories of two others. And I'm curious because you talked about you kept referencing a friend in Chicago as your sweetheart, and I'm wondering whether this was your first girlfriend or what, who also lost the son, and then Matthias in Minnesota, who
Lost the
lost
wife.
the wife.
Yes.
And I find that it's interesting that you are writing about your son, but then you are collecting the experiences of others and making part of that. And that takes me back to the beginning where you said you're quoting Hillary Clinton. It takes a
A village.
village to raise a child. And so in this village that you are building in the book, there are many others who have lost dear ones. And they too coped with this by writing little things that they have been able to share. And I find that very, very interesting why you had to do that. What pushed you?
In fact, in reference to Chicago, the lady in Chicago, that's my primary school classmate. I can say my girlfriend in primary school. If we were allowed to have girlfriends in primary school, she lost her son too, the same way. Her name is Marine Joker, and even at the moment, her brother just died 2 days ago.
Oh,
in Chicago. So when it happened to her, I didn't feel the pain. When this happened to me, I understood what she was going through. I kept calling her and say, "Oh, don't worry, it will go away." I think I referenced Mr. Arembi because shortly after my son, Mr. Arembi's daughter died in Atlanta, and I called him. And what Mr. Arembi told me is, everybody calls me and says it will go away. The pain will go away. This pain doesn't go away. It never goes away. And I said, sir, you are right. So, and then Matthias's situation was the same. I went to the funeral and I told Matthias, I said, the pain that you will have, you will always think about Celestine. And the eulogy that he had, I told him, I said, well, I'm going to include it in my book. That way you will know that I'm thinking about you. So it happens to a lot of people. I may have mentioned more than these three people in the book, but that's exactly what happens.
and again, I think that for me, if there's one thing that I would have taken away from the book, would have been chapter 11. Because chapter 11 is actually you writing to your son. And what I found so much intriguing is not just you writing to your son, but you found it necessary to ask Taku to write a letter. I don't know which of them. You want to read yours or you want to read Taku's? Well, Taku is not here. I'll rather you read yours, even though
Okay,
it's long. Yes.
I'll read mine.
Yes.
It's long. You think? Well, let me see how.
Well, take the relevant portion. I mean, any part will be good because again, it's a father's letter to a son.
Okay. Yes, I decided to write this, and Dr. Ngo and I had talked about writing letters. He published a book when his wife died, and he published a book, and it was really a letter that he wrote to his wife. And so when it happened, I told Dr. Ngo I was going to, when I got to this chapter, I told him I'm going to write a letter to Taku, to Junior, and I will just start from the beginning, and then if I get tired, I'll stop. And I said, my dear son, writing a letter to a son should be one of the greatest pleasures of life in the life of a father. But I am writing to you today in destitute, in painful thought, and with desperate imaginations, since all I know I am doing is expressing my feelings, not knowing how I will deliver these words of adulation to you. It seems like just yesterday, but 1 year has gone by without your presence in any way, shape, or form. Trips to your room have not relented, and the monitoring of the doors late at night is still a practical phenomenon, with empty imaginations that you could walk through someday, even though the possibility of that happening is crystal clear, particularly because it was I who sealed your coffin and filled the grave. I still cannot understand why this had to happen to me. And it is terribly agonizing to think that it did. And this too goes for everybody in the family. People have been asking me so many questions about what could have gone wrong, or maybe right, since no one knows and understands the will of God. I too have been asking myself the same questions and have realized that asking them is counterproductive, for there will never be right answers to share. What I know and believe is that you are now in a good resting place, probably doing what you wish to do as God allows you to. When you were here on when you are here with us, we took so many things for granted and made so many assumptions about the time we have under our control here on earth. It is now evidently clear to me and many others that we do not have the luxury of time to do all the things that we plan to do, which is why I have all these regrets about what you, Taku, and I could have been doing, rather than wasting all the energy rattling and wrangling on unproductive procrastinations. Uh, you see, when we sit in the house, when somebody this close leaves you, it is then you begin to think about all the things that you could have been doing with them. But when they are there with you, we always take things for granted. And I say this from my heart. If you live with the children, make sure you don't go to bed without making them understand that everything is fine. Because when it happens, that's all you think. The sadness is usually if it happens and you think that they didn't know whether or not you love them. So before I continue with our relationship concerns, I wish to know if you have already met with my parents and siblings who went before you. Do they recognize you for those who knew you here on earth? And is there a way to keep in touch with you all in heaven? And if it is, even if it is just to receive signals about our curiosities, back to you and me. That Friday afternoon that you came to my room to complain about your ears has recycled on my mind over and over again with wishes of the hope that I could get clear understanding of what I needed to do to avert such a catastrophic end. I want you to know now, as you must have known then, that your health and Taku's were always a priority to us, which is why your mother and I were so concerned about your plight in the first place. She reports well right now, but every now and then tears run down her eyes in memory of the joy she should have been having with you around. And I am sure you can find ways up there to signal to her some productive ways that would ease her pain of loss. Taku still does not talk much, as you already know, and is visibly shaken whenever the subject of your departure comes up. It may be great if you can send signals to or reach him too. He was your best friend, remember? So it goes.
Right. So again, I think in addition to just writing a straight like memoir of experiences after your son's death and you're feeling those emotions, I think this is really deep. As part of that healing process,
Yeah.
when you are able to write to the son who has passed away, and you are like frank, talking about the moments when you ought to have used more of those moments to talk about some of the things. I find it very, very potent. It's a very powerful form of healing, and I mean, I'm sure if
And
you
it's
had
important,
anything.
not to
Yeah,
disagree.
sure.
It's important to note that this letter, this chapter, I wrote it on top of the grave. I took my chair and pen and some bottles of water, went and sat there by myself and sat on his grave and wrote this to him and read it. And I have been reading this with Taku. Taku reads his when each time. Last weekend, I read this letter again to him because I went to his grave and met one of his uncles, and I said, "Okay, let me just read his letter to you, so you can hear." So that's what happened.
Yeah. So again, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking, having a conversation with Prince Kafain Emmanuel Mbeng, who lost his son 2 years ago, 25-year-old Emmanuel Jr., and painful situation. But he has taken time to write a book, which I am appealing that get a copy. I'm going to come to it. I think we have about 6 more minutes, but before that, please, for the sake of our community, if you learned anything from the ex-president of the United States, Donald J. Trump, America First, Our Community Too. When you have things like this that have been written by members of the community, if for nothing, grab a copy. This book is $21.95. $21.95. That is
on Amazon.
Amazon. Yes.
Type Painful Death by Prince Kafain will get you there.
Right. So again, the other thing that we can do is, I think Prince Kafain has a few copies that you can. I mean, I think some people will be able to. I'll put. Maybe we'll talk about this in the back and see how to. If you want copies directly that autographed, so that you can sign them.
Oh, sure.
Okay, it's also important. You can get them directly from him, and I will arrange on how to get that. But again, there are just too many things one can talk about from this whole book. But one of the distractions that you brought in, which you started off on, veered off, was, I mean, how in the midst of writing a book about your son who died, can you be talking about some political thing happening in Southern Cameroons? What is it that got you into bringing that in, sneaking that in to the book?
I had already told my son, he knew exactly. I told them about the struggle, and I told them, we were going to go to. I was going to go to Cameroon and stay in Cameroon. You people will come and visit me or stay there, and so I've taken them to Cameroon twice, and their mother has taken them to Cameroon maybe 2, 3, or 4 times. So they know and they enjoy. They like the freedom there, but. He died when our struggle was very hard, very, very high on my mind. I buried him with an Amazonian flag. It was there, everybody saw it. And my friend Ebini and I were planning to go to a movie opening on that Friday. I don't know if it was Friday, there was a movie that came out. And it was somewhere there in PG County. And so he called me and I said, I can't go to the movie. My son just died. He thought I was joking. And so even in the middle of that, I found time to deal with the struggle. Even at the funeral home, on the day we were burying him, I had a Zoom meeting with our county. Our Boyo County Zoom meeting. I had a Zoom meeting while he was there because a lot of children are dying back there too, and all those children are my children. So I just found time, I mean, he had already died. There was nothing I could do to change the fact. And in as much as the pain goes on, there's also pain back there because children are dying. We are dying. Amazonia is dying every day. And so we cannot ignore that. There are a lot of people who have gone through worse situations than Prince Kafain. And so because of that, I still had to put our struggle on the forefront while dealing with the pain of losing my son.
And Sam says, I will sure get a copy. May Junior's gentle soul continue to rest in peace. Thank you. And again, I continue to encourage people, get a copy, get a copy. The pain of a father who has lost a son. You can help say Ashia to that father by just buying a copy. And I'm saying this because the reason why I brought Prince Kafain here is not just because the son had died. That is the primary reason. But also because the story is a story of every family, especially families within the United States and Europe. Please, if you have kids, if you have children, young children, teenagers, adults, young adults, we need to pay attention to this group. We need to, as a community, pay attention to our kids. Because I think that we just presume that because they are here going with the flow, everything is going to move on. But again, get a copy. If you don't know how to get a copy, I'm going to put my phone number. I'll put Prince Kafain. You can reach him and get a copy so that we can promote our own. Let us learn to do that. Let us learn to buy things that are produced by our own. Get a copy. Get a copy. If you cannot read it, get a copy for your son, for your daughter, or get a copy for a friend, please. Now, Prince Kafain, what was the most difficult part writing this book?
The most difficult part writing the book is just the emotions of it, because sometimes you write a chapter, come back home, and then you just find your tears running down your eyes. Uh, so I would say the emotions, and the reminder that it really happened. Uh, each time I wrote a chapter, I'll come home and then you're trying to edit or trying to read over, and then you remind yourself that this actually happened. So that would be the most difficult part of the book, just the emotions of it.
I find it curious that you also mentioned the fact that you have a little, call it a memorial in front of your house, whereby I think there are pictures of deceased
Yes, I have
relatives.
I have a memorial wall where I have my parents who passed, my sisters who passed, Victorine, Joy, Angeline, and Irene. So I have that memorial wall, and then I have my grand a mother, and a few other people. My uncle. I had a picture there which would have been very useful for the Southern Cameroonians. My uncle was one of the first persons who was assassinated in Cameroon by the administration in 1964. He had just come back from Paris. Uh, was made a captain. He was made a captain. He was going to lead the Cameroonian army, but the reason they didn't choose him was because he was what you people call Anglophone. So they gave it to the guy whose name has been vibrating as the commander in chief, or the highest rank military person in that country that we don't want to be part of. Uh, so I had all those pictures and I put them there. And when you come in, when there is this Memorial Day, I will put candles and all that. You can't get into my house without saying greeting the people who departed. So I call it my memorial wall.
One of the so let's take 5 more, because there are 2 things I wanted you to address. Why did you find it necessary to put the funeral costs in the book? Because I realized you detailed how much everything came up to. That was going to something like $30,000 just to bury your son, and somebody advised you to cremate your son.
Yes.
And you found that insulting.
Yes. I don't know, because cremation is not a thing of our culture. If you Even though he's dead, we take care of dead people back home than the living. I come from Com, where they respect the dead more than the living. And so if they heard back home in Com, I'm a prince of Com, if they heard in Com that my son died and I burned him, I don't know how Mr. Lambert, I don't know how you'd feel if I had cremated. So that's probably a subject for another discussion. The reason I put the cost there was just for people to know that it's costly. It's costly. It's cheaper to take the corpse and bury in Cameroon than to bury here.
Right, which is, I mean, exactly where I was going to, because the other thing that I wanted to find out from you is, did you ever consider sending Junior back home in Cameroon to just go and stay in Cameroon for a year and feel good?
Sure. I considered taking all of them. I have a house back there. I was going to take them to just go and live there. We talked about it, but then the war came. But it's not easy, for children who are born here to be very interested. They may like to go and visit, but if they go there and they stay 2, 3 months, say, get me out of here.
Right, right. Yeah, so again, ladies and gentlemen, we have been talking about this book, Painful Death, The Loss of a Child is a Parent's Worst Nightmare. Prince Kafain had lost 4 sisters in within a span of 10 years, but then lost his son 2 years ago and decided to put pen to paper as a way of dealing with the tragedy. Our community, I'm talking about the African immigrant community, especially in the United States, we are dealing with too many issues that are making our mental health not good. We are not dealing with those properly. This is one way by which you can deal with those things. Depression, suffering from depression, maybe because you did not go through the grieving process. Prince Kafain has taught us a very great lesson. One way to deal with these issues is write. Write. Even if it's not for publishing, write. And I loved it when I heard him say that he wrote a particular chapter in this book, chapter 11, even made it so endearing now to me, on the grave of his son. He took the time to write a letter to his son on the son's grave. This, you cannot beat that. I really want to say thank you. And I really want to encourage everybody. I'm saying this, if I had a way of saying 100 people should call Prince Kafain and get a copy, that would be a way of continuing to tell him, we stand with you. The child was our child. The child is only yours when it's in the womb. After that, it becomes a child of the community. But then you have gone above and beyond to teach us how to deal not just with the loss of a child, but even about parenting. The presence is not enough just to be present with children in the home, but also to be friends with them. A few more comments, and I give you the last word. Alicia, thanks so much for sharing, Bobe. My own sister, Berenice, thank you, Prince Kafain, for sharing your painful experience with us, for this is a parent's worst nightmare. May Junior continue to rest easy, and may God continue to give you strength. So, Prince Kafain, any last words? You can take as much time as you want.
Yeah, thank you very much, all Lambert's callers, and thanks everybody for listening to us. If there is just one parent who is helped by this book, or one child, I would have accomplished something. So I wrote this book for you, not for myself, because I understand that it's a community problem. So, like Mr. Lambert has already said, it is painful. It's pain that never goes away, but you live with it, and you just have to find a way to deal with such pain every day, each and every day. So thank you, people, so much for listening to us. If we were helpful and if we entertained you, we are grateful. Thank you so much, Mr. Lambert, for organizing this broadcast.
Again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. It's beginning Thanksgiving week. We all give thanks to God the Father for keeping us together. We pray for the repose of Emmanuel Jr., that he may continue to rest in peace. Thank you for spending the time with us this evening. My next show is going to be on Thursday, on Thanksgiving Day. I'm going to be talking with a classmate friend of mine who left journalism school and settled in Sierra Leone. And it's going to be an exciting show. It's going to be at 11 a.m. I invite you to tune in. I know it's Thanksgiving Day, but that's going to be 11 a.m. before the real dinner time starts. So thank you all. And I would continue to say, please get a copy. Get a copy. Get a copy. If you don't want to read it, get a copy for a friend. If you know a friend who has a family, who has kids, especially young boys, get a copy and give to them as a Thanksgiving gift. Again, thank you all. I want to sincerely say thank you, Prince Kafain. I really appreciate the time. The one thing that I did not want to happen on this show did not happen. I was afraid you were going to break down at some point. And I'm very grateful that you were able to share very frankly and very intimately, and we'll continue to have similar conversations for the edification of our community. Thank you all, and again, have a good evening.
Thank you. The pleasure was mine.
Thank you.